Hi, this is Kevin, and today we're going to be talking about the difference between a path and an object in Inkscape. And the reason we want to do this is because sometimes you'll try to go and load a piece of text in whatever laser cutting software you might be working with. In my case, it's Glowforge. And instead of text, you just get a gray box, or it might even give you some sort of notification that says that there's been some sort of error. So let's talk about objects versus paths. So what I've done here, this is just an Inkscape. I've made a box using the rectangle tool, and I can tell that this is an object, not only because I named this one the object example, but also because if I click on this Edit Paths by Node tool, I only see 1, 2, 3 handles, and the fourth corner doesn't have anything. What this tells me is that I'm not dealing with a path, because if it was a path, I would have 4 of them. Basically, every corner would have its own node. Now, having things as objects has its advantages. So for example, with the rectangles, this top right-hand corner, you can drag it to round over the edges. Whereas if this was a path, you would not be able to do that. So to really understand the difference between an object and a path, I think it's important to go and take a look at what an SVG actually looks like. So I've opened up 2 examples in Atom. Atom is just a text editor that is often used for things like web development. It just colors the text so that you can see it in a way that makes sense. You could open up these files using Notepad or whatever text editor you would like, but it may not be as readable because they won't have spaces or tabs. It'll just be a big wall of text, which is not particularly fun. When you first open up an SVG, what you'll see is a lot of preamble which describes what kind of document you're working with. So when you were to open this file, say in Inkscape, it reads this first part so that it understands what the dimensions of the document are, what some of the standards are, and things like that. You may recognize some of this if you've done any web development, because it looks a little bit like HTML. And it turns out that SVGs are XML, which is somewhat like a cousin of HTML. So let's scroll to the bottom. Now this is the one that's the object example. And you'll notice that it has this little rect tag. That stands for rectangle. And it has styles, an ID, and then a width, height, and X and Y. So what's happening here is that it's defining a shape and giving the dimensions that you need to describe that shape. The style controls things like what the infill color is. It can control, well, you can kind of read them, how it's displayed, whether it's got a background, all of that kind of information. The width of the stroke, which is basically the width of the line around the edge of the object. Anyways, so this can be useful. Let's take a look at what happens after you click the Object to Path button. Path example. Still has the same preamble, but instead of a rect tag, we have a path tag. It has a lot of the same style elements. So for example, the width of that stroke is going to matter. But instead of having a width and a height, now we just have a collection of points. So each of these this is 4 sets of coordinates describing the corners of that rectangle. Now, so why would you want to have a path versus an object? Well, usually the reason is that when you have an object, you can't manipulate the nodes. So for example, let's mess with this. I can't just drag this bottom corner on its own. which can be a pain if I'm trying to fine-tune a shape. One of the other reasons I might want to convert to a path is if my object type is actually not handled by the laser software. So for example, with Glowforge, text tags cannot be handled by the Glowforge just yet, which means we need to convert them to a path so that it can actually be understood by the machine. You can kind of see why paths would be easier to read for a laser because it literally gives you the coordinates. And so that's almost like giving you the exact points that you need to move the laser to in order to get the design that you want. That's all for today. Please let me know in the comments if you have any other topics that you would like to see me cover. All right, happy making!